Viewers, we encourage you to continue subscribing to our channel, the African Integration News Agency. We also encourage you to continue subscribing to our conversations on the African Integration Think Tank. Prof, can you kindly take us through the different protocols of the FCFTA, and also tell us how easy the FTA is going to make air travel easy, and especially other than even air travel among people, because we see countries still having issues with travel. Our people on the continent, you go to Zambia, they need a visa. Zambian comes to Rwanda, they need, I think Rwanda has already abolished issues of the visa. It has actually, unlike some other countries on the continent. Why do we still have restrictions on visa, yet we keep forming intergovernmental organizations like ESC, FTA? We even still have countries where it is easy to get into, but even harder to exit, like DRC. I think DRC has an exit visa, South Sudan. What is the solution? Why are we having these problems, yet we keep new regs coming up?
Thank you. So AFCFTA is an important forum for addressing certain challenges that have restricted trade within the continent. But I'd like us to understand one thing about the AFCFTA. Now, the AFCFTA is an agreement, but this agreement is just but one pillar under the AU Agenda 2063. There are several other pillars. Now, what that means is that there are several parallel efforts that are not necessarily captured under the AFCFTA, but which address themselves to specific challenges within the continent. For instance, there is a protocol on free movement of people, an AU protocol on free movement of people. Now, this protocol complements, because it was negotiated as a parallel track. It was not part of the AFCFTA agreement, but it complements, because these are pillars under Agenda 2063. So what this protocol was meant to do was to allow for free movement of people, capital, ideas, technology, and everything. Now, for some reason, this protocol has not seen the light of day, and this protocol has only been ratified by 4 countries, among them Rwanda, and a few other countries that are fairly small in terms of size, which then gives the impression that the larger African economies are not very keen on free movement of persons. And the reasons they cite is that there are security concerns around free movement of persons. But I want to think that it's not possible for us to have free movement of goods without free movement of people. And for us to realize the benefits, the full benefits of AFCFTA, it's important that the freedoms around movement of goods, the freedoms around movement of services be accompanied by the freedom of movement. Not just movement, but also the freedom of establishment. So that we don't allow goods to move and restrict the ability of those countries. We restrict the ability of the business people to move with their goods. On the same vein, there are parallel initiatives that complement what the AFCFTA is trying to achieve. For instance, in terms of air transport, the heads of state have been on this issue for a long time. The Yamoussoukro Declaration is very many years old. That is where the origin of having a liberalized air transport market in the continent was mooted. But countries never took a keen interest, for some reason, in pushing for the liberalization of the air transport market. And that is the reason it's now so costly for you to move from Uganda to Rwanda. It's just as costly to move from Kampala to the UK as it is to move from Kampala to Nairobi because of these restrictions. And so a lot of effort has been put in establishing the single African air transport market. And by 2022, some 15 countries had come on board to pilot the single African air transport market initiative. So in as much as there are challenges, under the wider umbrella of Agenda 2063, some effort is being made so that there are enablers for that support the AFCFTA agenda.
We thank you so much, viewers, for all the time you're giving us. We're having a very lively debate with Professor Go here. Professor Go, what benefits? Because, for instance, literally everyone is an SME on the continent, for as long as you have a business that is small, medium on the continent. We've seen the East African Business Council doing its best to have seminars involving the women, cross-border women doing business, the youth. Why do we still have SMEs finding it hard to operate on the continent? What new ideas is the FCTA bringing on board to help SMEs flourish, especially under the different initiatives that we just talked about?
Thank you. Now, the SMEs in Africa are a very, very important component of the trading landscape. They are not just important in the trading landscape, they are also serious employers in the continent. And so in many of the trading regimes, a lot of thought has gone into trying to put in place a framework that can support the small businesses to flourish. For instance, under the EAC and under COMESA, there is a program called the Simplified Trade Regime. Essentially, how this regime works is that neighboring countries agree on a common list of items that can be traded, that are regularly traded, but which can be traded subject to a restriction on the value of those commodities that cross borders, without following the normal order of filling in documents and making the process of goods crossing the borders cumbersome. Now, that is an effort that is essentially meant to support the small traders to thrive. In fact, the restriction on the value of commodities that cross borders is only meant to control each consignment that crosses the border under the simplified trade regime. That means that one trader can actually cross the border a couple of times. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, other than that, for the moment, the AFCFTA doesn't have a simplified trade regime, but there's a lot of interest in getting the AFCFTA to upscale what is happening in those regimes to support the small traders. But there are also a lot of effort at the AFCFTA level to have the AFCFTA, to have the SMEs join value chains that are supported by a number of institutions. There are efforts, funding efforts, geared that have been mooted to be targeted at helping the SMEs to link up to value chains so that the SMEs are able to flourish and to employ more people, but also to get into a formal arena as formal businesses in the continent. So, in as much as there's no structure at the AFCFTA, you may want to note that the protocols under the AFCFTA there's a protocol on women and youth in trade. Now, the SMEs in Africa are essentially run by women and youth. In fact, data shows that 98% of SMEs are actually run by youth and women. So what that means is that if there is a protocol that addresses itself to the needs, to those peculiar challenges of women and youth, then in a way, in an indirect way, it is supporting the SMEs. Now, there's a protocol on digital trade. Now, this protocol actually addresses itself to SMEs, particularly the youth who are just getting into trade, because the youth are tech savvy, and the youth are innovative, and technology is cheap, because when you use technology, you don't need a big office space. If you're just starting, you can actually start from your house and still do business. And so these are efforts that indirectly support small and medium enterprises. Now, that is in recognition of the importance of small and medium enterprises within the continent.
Okay. And then the issue of the guided trade initiative, where countries that have competitive advantages over the others. For example, Tanzania is good at production of fruits. Then they can export that to a market. Then the other. What do you say about that? The guided trade initiative. How is it moving so far?
Thank you. Now, the guided trade initiative is an initiative that was mooted to help support countries that were ready to trade under the AfCFTA regime. And in the pilot phase, there were 7 countries that were selected. Within EAC, Rwanda, Kenya, and Tanzania were selected. Now, these countries were then given a scope or a range of goods that they could start to trade in. And arising from that initiative, a number of transactions have actually taken place under the AfCFTA. Egypt has read in a number of transactions under the initiative. Kenya has read in a number of transactions. Rwanda has read in a number of transactions. Mauritius has read in a number of transactions under the regime. And the second phase of the guided trade initiative is due to kick in October. After there is a meeting that is scheduled for Kigali in October. And what this meeting is intended to do is that there are countries that have expressed interest in joining the initiative. And when I look at the last, I read the report of the last summit. And the last summit was held in July this year. Now, the report of the last summit shows that 29 countries have expressed interest, which means that if you add that to the 7, then we are talking about 36 countries. That is more than half the number of countries in Africa. And that actually shows you the level of interest, the level of seriousness, the level of commitment that countries are attaching to AfCFTA. In addition, that meeting is meant to help expand the scope of commodities to be traded. And countries are actually being invited to join, so that as many as possible, if not all, can join the initiative, which effectively would mean that trading has started in earnest. Of course, there are challenges when you're starting a process. So for the pioneers, there were teething problems. But I believe that those challenges will be addressed with time, so that as many countries join, the whole process will be faced with fewer and fewer obstacles, because we learn as we export.
Okay. Yeah. Our viewers, I think this brings us to the end of our interview. It's been a great time really having a chat with Professor Go. He's given us a lot of highlights on the integration process, on how far the FCTA is going, how much it is going to be a very big turning point for the continent. We have the East African community, we have COMESA, we have SADC, but mainly when it comes to trade, it is EAC and COMESA that really make a lot of progress. So this brings us to the end. I want to thank you so much, Professor, for finding time to speak to the Africa Integration Think Tank and the African Integration News Agency. We hope we can have you again here next time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.